welcome to this webinar on assessment, evaluation, reporting, and the use of generative AI. I'm Katrina Gowett, and my partner Whitney McKinley. We are Student Achievement for Learning Innovation Consultants and are very happy to answer any questions you might have about this. We will include information at the end that you can email. So let's get started. The great news is that you can use generative AI for report card writing. Now, you can use it, however, there are stipulations and guidance around that. You can read it more fulsome in the updated WCDSB GenAI educator guidelines, and I'm just going to go over the main points with you here. So the first being that we need to make sure that any AI tool that you are using has met the privacy requirements to protect student data. We have an approved tool, which I'll go over later. But we want to make sure that we are not inputting any student information. So no names, not even first names. We want to be preventative to make sure that we are protecting their privacy. The second piece we need to know is that we really do need to look at the outputs carefully and read through them to make sure that they match up with what we've seen students demonstrate in class, the conversations we've had, the observations, the final products. All of those need to align to what we have directly experienced with that student. And if they don't, then we need to substantially modify and personalize those comments. We're going to personalize them anyways. We want to have that human touch and make sure that it is your voice that comes through on a student's report card. And at the end of the day, make sure you use your professional judgment. You are the one that is reporting and responsible for it. So make sure that you are aligning yourselves with that. Now, this isn't necessarily any different than using a bank of comments, of report card comments. I know I have a large file of them, and when I use those, I make sure that I'm adjusting it to match my student specifically. If someone shared some comment banks with me, I'm going to take those, look at them, take the pieces that I really like, and leave the rest out. So you can think of it that way. It's the privacy piece we want to be especially careful around. In elementary and secondary, there was guidance that came out in mid-December of 2024, and you can see that here. You can also check out StaffNet to look at the document specifically, but they do give explicit guidance on how generative AI may help you and how they may not be used, and making sure that you never input student names, work examples, personal details, all of those pieces. And here's the secondary one. It looks very similar. Now, our approved tool here at Waterloo Catholic is Microsoft Copilot, and it is a yellow app. This means, yes, you can use it, but there are some stipulations. The first is you must be logged in with your WCDSB credentials. You must also be very careful about the information you input into any generative AI model, including Microsoft Copilot. That means if you're attaching documents, you're looking at those documents before you do that to make sure there's no personal information there. We want to leave out things that could really come back and be found later down the road. Most of the generative AI companies, the information that we input into their systems is stored and can be used to train future models. So that's why we want to be especially careful. If there is a privacy breach, we really can't pull that information back. The other thing we want to make you aware of is that there are limitations to generative AI. If we don't give it enough information, it hallucinates. It'll make up facts or details. It can also be really biased, just like the humans that have filled the internet with all kinds of information. We want to make sure that there isn't bias or misinformation in the work that we end up using maybe in our report card. So you can access Copilot from the My Apps page, and you'll see when you log in, there's a green shield. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to go to a new chat here. Okay, so you can see I'm logged in the bottom left, and you can see there's a green shield here that indicates I have enterprise data protection. You can learn more about that there if you like. So I know that I am protected, which is great. It is important to note that other tools do not have this protection.
If other models do have this type of protection, it usually is not automatic and it has to be specifically toggled off. For example, ChatGPT.
When we're working with a tool such as generative AI, um, it is a computer, it's a bot, and we need to be able to speak to it in a way that it's going to understand exactly what we need. And for that to happen, we really need to be specific. So, prompt engineering, it's how we can communicate with generative AI with natural language. So, I'm going to show you a framework here. We really like the PrEP framework as developed by Dan Fitzpatrick and his team. Um, if we're not specific, it's going to make up information. So when we are putting in our prompt, we want to make sure we have a question or a direction of what we want it to do. We want to give it a role. So, for example, I'm a grade 5 teacher in Ontario. If it doesn't know who the role is they're taking on, then they might just assume it's a grade 2 teacher from California. We want to be explicit. So, what information or documents might we want it to refer to? So, in the context of report card writing, we want growing success to be something we mention. Parameters, the tone, all of those pieces. How long do we want it to be? What format? Is it going to be paragraph style? Is it going to have avoid your I statements. And I'll show you some of those examples later. But if we have a really comprehensive, what we would call a micro prompt, because it's so detailed, we're going to get really great outputs. And this is not only important for us to save time, but also it's important for the environment. The less back and forth that is done on a generative AI tool, the less energy it will use. One prompt can actually take 10 times more energy than one Google search. So do it not only for yourself, but for the environment. And then, of course, when we get that output, we want to check it over. So the edit framework is really helpful so we can evaluate it to make sure that the facts are accurate. We can look at other sources. We need to identify bias and misinformation that might be in that output. And then, of course, we're going to transform it and adjust it to meet the needs of our students. Okay, so some tips. Say who you are, where you are from, be explicit. It's really helpful to tell it how many characters you want. That will really narrow it down and help with the editing process. As we know, the boxes in Aspen are quite short. Um, and you can see a really short example of a prompt that you might end up using. So subject, how many characters, the grade. We're saying, make sure it's paragraph, parent-friendly language. And this right here, written in an asset framework and provide hope to the student and parents. This is language directly taken from Growing Success. Okay, so some use case ideas. The one I really like is actually those tricky next steps in our learning skills. So, for example, I have a female student who constantly shouts out during instructional time. I'm a grade 2 teacher in Ontario and need to include this in her learning skill report card comment. Write a comment about this behavior. Make it parent-friendly language. So I've gone into Copilot to try this one out, and I'll show you what it looked like. So I put my prompt here, and then it came back with student's name is an enthusiastic and active participant in class. However, they often find it challenging to wait their turn, etc., etc. So this is a great next step that I can use in my learning skill comment. I'll swap out their name. Now it might be a little bit too long, so I can come back and say, actually, could you shorten that and adjust it to a male student? And it will change those pronouns really quickly and make it more concise. So that's a really great use case. We can also do some next steps for home suggestion. So, write it with a suggestion on how the skill could be practiced further at home. That's a great way to end off a comment. We can use it as revision. So many of us have comment banks, and we might want them to be just polished up a little bit, uh, you know, correct some grammar mistakes, all of those pieces, that can be helpful. It can also be great if you have students who are maybe twins or siblings and you need to make a comment sound a little bit different. We can also use it to update it. So if we change grades or a new curriculum drops and we need to build out our comment bank again, generative AI is a great way to do this, reduce the time that takes. Okay, so this right here, you'll see it's quite large. So this is actually a prompt. The whole thing is a prompt that I would insert into Copilot. It is a fill in the blank. So I'm going to substitute out the grade, which pronoun I'm using if I want this many characters. Please note the characters are approximate. They're not exact. So it isn't, again, super accurate, but it'll be close enough. And then here's where I'm going to put my point form notes about all of the different skills. So I'll put responsibility, student follows the rules of our classroom, but sometimes struggles outside on the yard. Organization, keeps an agenda, but desk is really messy. Whatever those comments are, you can put them point form here. This is also a great opportunity to conference with your students about the skills and write some point form notes so that it really is personalized and reflects your student. So I could take this, I would fill in the blanks, put it into Copilot, and I would get a comprehensive draft of a learning skill I would then take into a document to edit with student names, specific examples, etc. Okay, this is a curriculum prompt template. I wrote this one intending it for science or social studies because it meets the format of those comments. So this is important information up here. You'll notice that we insert our grade, subject. We're mentioning our parents again. And then here's where I'm going to have my strand that we always need to start that box off with. And then we have a strength, next step. Here's where I like to actually insert directly from the ministry website the curriculum expectation that I'm focusing on here. And then I'll often add on an example of a project that we did. So here is what it might look like. So this is, I filled in the blanks. Here is this was grade 5 for government. So I put in the curriculum expectation here, and then I added in, he created a clearly communicated scratch coding animation about the right to vote. And so I did, again, curriculum expectation, example of what they did, and a next step. And it came out with this draft, which I would be really pleased with. And I could then take this and I could say, now can you write it for a level 4 student, for a level 3 student, for a female student, for a male student? And that can help me build out my comment bank. Okay, so creating assessments in the age of AI. If you are an intermediate student or maybe a grade 6 to 12 teacher, you may be noticing that you're getting students completing assessments that likely are not their own work. It looks, maybe there's vocabulary they're using that doesn't match with what they usually use. And so you may have suspicions that they're using generative AI to complete their work. This can be really, this information here might be really helpful for you to think about. If I was an intermediate teacher, I would actually take my assessment and I would put it into generative AI and ask it to complete it as a grade 8 student and see what it gave me. That's going to give me a good idea if it can be done well by AI. And if it is done well by AI, I really need to ask myself some questions. Could someone complete this assignment without being in my class? If the answer is yes, okay, I've got to adjust something. Could someone do it without my specific class materials? The things that are in the classroom, maybe our anchor charts, etc. Could it be done without referencing our classroom discussions? So if you've answered yes to any of them, you're going to want to look at that assessment again and make some switches, okay? And that doesn't mean you have to scrap it. You just need to strengthen it with a couple other elements. So adding in some class-specific activities or discussions as part of the questions, adding in a personal reflection or evidence that they gathered during the class, some of their process documentation. So the work as they're going through rather than the final product. And even some, real-time data collection you can do. And then we also, of course, need to validate it and um, ask ourselves some questions. We can even put it through a Copilot again to see how it does at completing the assignment. And that can be really helpful for our own reflection of our professional practice and to encourage our students to use their own critical thinking skills rather than relying on generative AI. Okay, we can also use generative AI as a rubric creation tool. This is super powerful. Rubrics are, they really can, a good rubric can take a long time to develop. And sometimes we might end up relying on generic rubrics or ones that don't specifically meet the assessment. And so generative AI is a great tool to leverage to create those specific rubrics. So I'm going to just, you can see this fill in the blank here. We just put in the title of the task and then we insert the task here. So I'm just going to take this one that I had already filled out. This one is a grade 5 assignment for a fractured fairy tale. So I can paste it in. It's already pre-filled out. And notice that it was looking for Ontario growing success. And so now I'm seeing a rubric that would reflect much of what growing success guides me to do. However, this rubric, I know rubrics are really challenging for students to understand sometimes. And so I want to change the language. So I can say, please read in student-friendly language for a grade 5 level. Now it's going to take that and it's rewritten it. So that's fantastic. I can take this and directly copy it into a doc and that will work. I can also ask it to create a PDF document of this. So it'll take a minute. I can also do something called a prompt flow, or what I call a prompt flow. So I started off with a micro prompt, right? I'm really specific. Now I'm going to ask it to do a bunch of tasks, so macro prompts, a bunch of tasks to that directly relate back to this rubric. So you can see here, I've got my PDF now. Okay, so let's think about this. I always really liked having students edit each other's work. So I could ask now, okay, so now based on the rubric, create a simplified and scaffolded editing checklist for my students. So now it's asking specific questions for them as they're reading through a peer's story. So that's great. Now I could say, okay, I want to let my parents or the families know about what students are doing. So I could say, write a short blurb to parents about this task and how they can help out at home. I'm going to say, make it 1 paragraph. Okay, and so now I can read this over and make any adjustments I need to and send it out either by email or post it on the LMS for parents. I could also have it create feedback. I'll say create 20 feedback blurbs, sentences. Okay, so I'm going to have it create feedback sentences for me to use to assess the student work. Just so you're aware, we should not be having generative AI assess student work. There is information out there about, uploading a rubric and a student piece of work, but there are many issues with uploading student work. Generative AI is not reliable enough. Like this is our first reason, right? Generative AI is not reliable enough to do that task. Also, we are the teacher in the room, right? And we need to make sure that we can validate and confirm that that mark is genuine. So if we have a computer doing that, um, that's not going to be as accurate. We also need to think about intellectual property. If you upload student work into a tool, now that company owns that work and can be used it in their training data. Also, privacy, safety, and security. It could be a privacy breach. Lots of students refer and make connections to their own personal lives. And if we upload that information, we've just betrayed that trust, right? So here, though, I have 20 different feedback sentences that I could pick and choose from as I'm assessing student work. So you can see how I can bring it from one task to another. I could also then come in and ask it to write some report card comments at different levels and see how that works for me. Okay, back to the presentation. Now I want to make sure that everyone's aware of find and replace. So let me go back and I'll demonstrate how this works. Okay, so this one here, it said student's name, right? So I'm going to go in and find a doc. Okay, I have a blank doc here. Maybe this is where I'm pulling in comments for a specific student. So I'm going to paste Copilot's comment here, and I'm just going to grab this here, copy. Now I'm going to hit Control H. You could do this with Control F, you just have to go through another step. So Control H on Chromebooks, Cloudbooks. I think on Apple devices, it will be maybe Control Shift H. So I'm going to paste this here. So it's going to find, you can see it's found all instances of where it says student's name. And now I can put in the name Sarah. And I could replace one at a time. See how this is a darker green? So I could do replace just one at a time, or I can click replace all. And so now my comment reads, Sarah is an enthusiastic and active participant in class. However, Sarah often finds it challenging, etc., etc. So this is a really fast way to do that find and replace and make sure we're protecting student privacy. Okay, so if you're looking for more, we have this great prompt crafting resource that I just want to share with you quickly. We're continuing to add to it constantly, so I would highly recommend that you don't make a copy and just check back to see what new things have popped up. So we do have, all of these are fill in the blank prompts, and I should say they are micro prompts, so they're the really detailed ones. We have administrative tasks. We have ones for school administrators, document analysis. So this can be helpful if you've uploaded a PDF document, make sure that it's publicly available. It doesn't include any, sensitive information, but it can help you analyze it. We have lesson planning templates, assessment ones. This is where I got the task rubric one from, social emotional learning. And we're working with Spec Ed right now to develop prompts for IEP, expectation creation, all of those pieces. We also have coming soon ones to support our ML learners, secondary social sciences, and then we're going to build out more for religion, science, literacy, etc. So you can check out some ideas here. You can also head over to the WCDSB AI guidelines page. If you just even Google WCDSB innovation, you're going to find it here, innovate. And if you click on AI, you can see we have student guidelines, educator guidelines, and our infographic folder of these posters. You can also head over to the podcast. We are in season 2 of the podcast, and you can listen directly from the website or go to your favorite podcast player. We're offering a lot of support, so if you would like us out to your school, please contact us and we can help you out. We have a series of webinars just like this one that you can tune into, and we would love to connect with you. So if you have any questions, please either email Whitney or myself, and we can get back to you with those answers. Thank you for staying and watching.